apply that technology into the supply chain. Okay, and you guys are all going to be working in related spaces. Some of the problems that you see in supply chain space. Number one, the data in a supply chain is very, very opaque. Okay, so when you see these issues like the chip shortage, you see the container shortage. Okay, when you see people unable to get stuff on time, right? There are fundamental reasons why that happens. A lot of it has to do with lack of visibility for data, lack of data in the right place, and because of the way supply chains are built. So we will kind of come to the solutions later. But if you were to leverage blockchain technology for it, you can enable collaboration between different parties and in a trustless environment. I don't need to trust somebody because the math of the code is trustworthy. Okay? So we can actually connect the dots from order to visibility in retail. We can even do additional things like supply chain finance, and we can go deep tier supply chain and across the whole value chain. Typically, if you take an auto manufacturer or large industrial manufacturer, an OEM like a Ford or Caterpillar or any of those big companies, let's say you buy a car, that car manufactured by Ford will have many, many components in it. And the manufacturer might get an engine from a tier 1 supplier. The engine might have certain sub-assemblies in it that they get from a tier 2 supplier. Within that, there may be some circuit boards that comes from a tier 3 or a system that comes from a tier 3 supplier. Within those, there may be some chips that come from a semiconductor manufacturer, a tier 4 or tier 5. So these supply chains can run 5 or 10 tiers deep. And the OEM really doesn't know who is beyond tier 1, because tier 1 does not really want to tell you who the tier 2s are, because people are afraid that you will come around them, you'll squeeze for pricing, you will bypass you. So all of this stuff happens in the supply chain, right? So because of that, people have to basically share information between parties. So if I'm a tier 4 or tier 5 supplier, I will send my data to my tier 4. They will remove all my identifying data, aggregate it into their data, and then send it to the next guy, to tier 3, we'll do it to tier 2 and tier 1 and so on and so forth, right? It is a human process. Unfortunately, many of the supply chains still running on Excel spreadsheets and email and EDI. Okay? There isn't a single centralized source of doing this because nobody trusts each other. Okay? So that's one of the problems that we face in supply chains. Okay? And because of this disconnect between parties, you end up with different silos of data. So you have complete lack of traceability across this, unless you have massive control over your entire supply chain. And in fact, 80-90% of a supply chain is outside the four walls of the enterprise. And if you look at SAP or any ERP system, they are by definition enterprise resource planning systems. Those systems do not have any idea about who their suppliers are. They might be extended to supply chain management systems and can include your tier 1, but there's no way to know who is in tier 2 because you don't even know who they are. They're not telling you, right? So when you start looking at some of the traceability problems like food recall, okay? Let's say Walmart has to recall spinach, E. coli outbreak. Where did it come from? Where did it go? It comes from a farm. From the farms, it gets triple washed spinach, goes through some processing facility, gets packaged, put in a temperature controlled truck, moved to a warehouse. From the warehouse, it goes to a distributor. From the distributor, it gets to Walmart. From the retail store, you come and buy and you take it home. So now we have this recall. Every one of these participants there have multiple systems in there. They have SAP, they have Oracle, they have warehouse management systems, they have transportation management systems. You don't know where stuff came from or where it went. Only thing you know that the retail point of sale, we know that some transactions happened. We don't know who came in and bought. You might have paid cash to buy something. You might have bought it on a credit card. Maybe they got your loyalty rewards information. that situation, you really don't know what happened. Okay? It used to take about 2 weeks per store for Walmart to do this. And when they implemented Food Trust jointly with IBM, they were able to bring it down to 7 seconds flat once they connected the dots. Okay? The other challenges that we see is, and in fact, I was reading this article today, organic cotton from India. This article was shared, and there was a lot of fraud happening inside the organic cotton industry. So we are buying organic food. How do we know it's actually organic? We are actually trusting the brands. The brands are trusting the certification process. The certification process happens once a year. And people go and supposed to take soil samples and get the data. Who knows if the data has been tampered with or not, so audit process is properly done or not, right? So those are some of the other issues. The third challenge here is, because of all this stuff, we have lack of trust. And when you take something like a smart contract, you can actually make it automated, and trust is provided because there is evidence with visibility, and we can do this with much lower impact, and you can have create more goodwill with that. Okay? Because when you share some data, you are able to improve the overall efficiency of the supply chain. Okay? So when you look at the supply chain, logistics, etc., you have inventory shortage is obviously a challenge that we see in the headlines. So we need to be able to get into deep tier visibility for better inventory data. If I want to do a damage return, now I need to have reverse logistics runs backwards through all the way to the manufacturer. So I need to be able to do invoice reconciliation, figure out where the damage happened. Did it happen during the trucking segment? Did it happen at the customer side? Did it happen in the factory segment? How do you bring a degree of automation to that? How do you make sure that the vaccine was supposed to be maintained at a certain temperature, or the meat was supposed to be maintained within a freezer temperature? You can bring in data from IoT sensors and other tools like that, and you can automate the rules around it. Okay? Any questions so far? Before I go into some examples and use cases.
Yes, go ahead.
So you did mention that there would be like participants in a blockchain who would like validate the data to make sure the transaction is like a good one. Who are these individuals that we're like referring to? Are they like other companies, or are they other like just individuals who are sitting behind computers validating transactions? I guess that's where I'm having a hard time connecting the dots there.
Great question. Great question. Let us understand how brands create trust today. Okay? And let's take organic food, for example. Anything that is sold as organic in US has to be certified by USDA. Regardless of whether it is sourced in China or India or Mexico, it has to be certified by USDA. Okay? Now, how does USDA go to these other countries and certify it? They don't, right? What they do is they have certain organizations that are certifying authorities. In the case of textiles, there is Global Organic Textile Society. In the case of latex, there is Global Organic Latex Society, right? And there are companies like Control Union, OneCert, EcoCert. What they do is go to the farms, and they will take soil samples. They will collect some data, and some of the data they collect, for example, you might be licensed to produce, let's say, 10 tons of certain material. Now, they will collect the data around how much was produced, how much was sold. And they will reconcile this data to see, did 10 become 12 or 20, right? Did my neighbor give you some data, right? So there is some process that goes around with human verification to make sure the certification is valid, right? And when you automate with technology, some of these processes have to be followed. And you can automate and you can speed things up. You can have a workflow that people can sign off. And technology by itself is not smart enough to figure things out. Okay. Good question.
Any other questions?